Hi, you guys. Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this very courageous and playful, yet super intense new moon we've got coming up here on Thursday, July 24th. The new moon peaks at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, and this takes place in the sign of Leo, 2 degrees Leo, hence the courageousness and the playfulness of this new moon. But this new moon makes basically an exact opposition with Pluto and also is making a very, very strong trine to Neptune and Saturn. There's basically a lot of very intense conversations going on between all those celestial bodies up there for this new moon. So what I'm going to do in this recording, first of all, we're going to break down the sign of Leo. Because as usual, because this is a new moon, this is a time to be manifesting new beginnings and growth that are related to this sign of Leo. Approximately 6 months from now, we'll have the full moon in the sign of Leo. That would be the peak of the growth cycle. So we'll break down the sign of Leo for you, but then I'm going to pull up the chart and I'm going to show you all these very, very prominent astrological forces that are coming through with this new moon. And then as usual, I'm also going to be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Leo, because these parts of our body become activated or sensitized anytime anything up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Leo. And for this transit, we do have Sun, Moon, and Mercury, which Mercury is in retrograde, going through the sign of Leo. So I will be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our bodies. And as usual, I will mention some gemstones that also resonate well with the sign of Leo. Now, before I get rolling with this, I do want to say that this will be the last new moon in the sign of Leo, and that the South Node won't be in there. Like the South Node next summer, the end of July of next year, the South Node will be moving into the sign of Leo. So we will be having eclipses in the sign of Leo next year. Next year's new moon in the sign of Leo will be a South Node solar eclipse in the sign of Leo. But even more importantly, I got to point this out. I will be making a video to go into way more depth about this, but there is going to be a massive total solar eclipse, South Node solar eclipse in the sign of Leo in the summer of 2027. I believe it's August 2nd. And this total solar eclipse is so powerful. It apparently will last 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Now, this eclipse would not be, from what I can see, I don't think it's going to be visible really anywhere in the United States. Maybe a little bit of Maine, but I'm not really sure about that. But where it does go through is basically right through Egypt, and some parts of it will hit through Israel and Iran. And how interesting is that? And not only that, but let's keep in mind, we got to bring up Donald Trump because there's a whole, load of information about Donald Trump out there right now. And as I said so many months ago, I definitely, I'll just say, use the word predicted that Donald Trump would win. But I said something weird will happen. And I didn't even realize it until just a few days ago when I started looking into this. But that total solar eclipse that lasts 6 minutes long, that it will be so tightly conjunct his natal Pluto in the sign of Leo in his first house, his house of self. That South Node is a drain point. That is a loss of power. Okay, so I know this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but this sign of Leo, I think, better buckle up, okay? But honestly, it's definitely one of my favorite signs of the zodiac. It is such a fun, playful, courageous, loyal energy. So let's get back on track here. Let's talk about the sign of Leo. So Leo is what we call the fixed fire sign. When we talk about fixed in astrology, we're talking about the signs that like to do things with consistency, okay? Like the mutable signs will be like, oh, I'm going to go over here. Oh, I'm sidetracked. Oh, I'm going to detour over here. Versus the cardinal signs like to come through with force. The fixed signs come in the middle of a season. They like things to be consistent. They like to do things with a steadfast way. And in that element of fire in Western astrology is very strongly associated with just energy in and of itself. This is a very energetic and tends to be very optimistic energy. And really all the fire signs can come with this sense of optimism and energy. But in that modality of being fixed, it can hold the energy in. It's really the hottest sign of the zodiac for most of us in the world. When the sun moves into the sign of Leo, it's the hottest time of year. It's the fixed part of summer, the middle of summer. Okay, now the sign of Leo is ruled by the sun. Okay, the sun being the brightest light in the sky. As I've said so many times before, the sign of Leo tends to be like the brightest light wherever it goes. And I always use him as an example because I know he doesn't mind it. I think he kind of gets a little giggle out of it. My father is very, very Leo. He's a sun in Leo, Leo rising, Pluto in Leo, and Mercury in Leo. And he's just always, even at his age now, he's still walking around going, "Hey, everybody, how you doing over there? How you doing?" But he's also had this incredible willpower. The motto for the sign of Leo is "I will." Okay, this is like the sign of willpower. Okay, I think about the fact that my dad basically built two houses by himself. I mean, in total, he built three houses, but two of them he basically built by himself. Just with incredible willpower, but with optimism. Okay, how many of us want to manifest more willpower with optimism into our lives? Okay, now also, the sign of Leo, it's represented by the lion, like the lion that is very, very courageous, yet very, very playful. Okay, lion's like the king or the queen of the jungle. Okay, we think about this sign of Leo being like the king or the queen of the zodiac. I'll just put this out there right now. The sign of Leo does rule the heart. We'll go deeper into this a little later on in the recording. But when we think about that heart chakra, it's like that's why this sign comes with a very strong tendency for loyalty. Okay, so how do you want to grow in these ways that are related to this sign of Leo? Now, like I said, we will have the sun and the moon and Mercury all shining through the sign of Leo for this transit. And so, of course, we're all receiving this, fiery energy. Let's get up. Let's do what we got to do. Let's be playful. Let's be courageous. But as mentioned, this new moon is very, very strongly opposing Pluto. Pluto, who can be Pluto's the influencer of our deep, powerful spiritual willpower and our spiritual drive. But Pluto can also be destructive and can also hit the psyche really, really hard. So take that into consideration. Again, I'll get deeper into this a little later on in the recording. But overall, at this point, be thinking, how do you want to grow in these ways that are related to the sign of Leo? And another thing to take into consideration is that, of course, we all receive this energetic force as a collective. And when I say that, what I mean, I'm not just talking about that we all receive it. It's also, we are all connected. There's just no way around it. Whether you like somebody, you disagree with them, or whatever it is, we are all still connected. So keep that in mind when you're, trying to manifest this growth. Be thinking about your loved ones, be thinking about, anybody that you want to grow in these ways. But for yourself, it can be massively significant to get familiar with your natal chart to see which area of your life this is specifically manifesting for you. Okay, maybe it's coming through your third house, your house of communication, and you want to step into more courage and potentially even playfulness or loyalty with your communication skills. Or maybe it's coming through, say, your 10th house, your house of career, your house of, status in the world. How do you want to grow in those ways? Maybe it's coming through your 12th house, your house of karma, and you want to manifest more, maybe optimistic and fun, but yet courageous, new beginnings in the area of your life that rolls over your karma and your spiritual debt. It's so incredibly unique to each and every one of us. And not only that, but do you have anything near 2 degrees Leo in your natal chart? And really, do you have anything near 2 degrees in any zodiac sign in your natal chart? Because if so, that thing is getting activated. And I will show you why when we pull up the chart here. And when I say near 2 degrees, I'm going to go with most prominently between 1 and 3 degrees of any zodiac sign, but you really could even go down to like 0 degrees up to 4 or 5 degrees. But most prominently, look in your chart to see if you've got, especially something at 2 degrees in any zodiac sign. I guarantee you it's getting activated with this new moon. And again, then take into consideration whatever that thing is, where is that in your natal chart? Because that part of your chart is also going to be heavily, heavily activated. And I kid you not, this sign of Leo, wherever it's coming through, and if you're using Placidus or equal sign, then it might be coming through 2 or potentially even 3 houses in your natal chart. You want to learn about that area of your chart because there is going to be a lot of activity in there over these next couple years, I should say. Really, really interesting, powerful stuff that is also, I'll just say it right now. There could be, like I'm talking about Donald Trump's, this South Node in 2027 with this eclipse is going to go over his Pluto. that really could very strongly manifest as a loss of power. And it kind of just, it's very interesting when we think about what's going on in the world. I know a lot of people are furious with Trump right now. I think most of you know this about me, that I lost my faith in the federal government a very long time ago. I have not been a Trumper or any of them. I just don't participate in that kind of thing. But clearly, most people do. So it's always something I want to try and include into astrology, because I know a lot of people get curious about that. But thinking about that, how this is going to be impacting Donald Trump's chart, and also how is this going to be impacting your own natal chart? This new moon comes through Donald Trump's first house, his house of self. It's not really tightly conjunct much in his chart, but it's still there in his house of self. So really, really, really interesting stuff going on here. Mostly, how do you want to grow in these ways that are related to the sign of Leo? Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up the chart here. Okay, so if you're new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. With geocentric, we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. These right here are the symbols for the planets and celestial bodies. Like there is Uranus, there's Venus, there's Jupiter, here's the moon, here's the sun. When we go in the wheel, just a little ways, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all of those planets and celestial bodies will be bringing through onto Earth at the time of this new moon. Okay, so let's go here. This right here is a symbol for the sun. This right here is the glyph for the sign of Leo. This right here is the symbol for the moon. And this right here is the glyph for the sign of Leo. Anytime we have a new moon, it means the sun and the moon are exactly in the same spot in the zodiac. Okay, so we got 2 degrees and 8 minutes. Leo, that is right in the that's very, very pure Leo energy. Okay, at 2 degrees and 8 minutes. It's not blending in with other fire signs yet. Okay, so be thinking about that as well. The fact that it is such pure Leo energy and that heart chakra just opening wide open. Okay, so there's that. Now, I feel like I should just get right into this. This right here is Pluto. So you see Pluto is at 2 degrees, 36 minutes, Aquarius, retrograde. Okay, when something like Pluto is in retrograde, it's almost like he's just more aggressive. If you think about what Pluto influences, Pluto is Hades, the ruler of the underworld. Okay, Pluto is aggressive. And Pluto can be very, very empowering, is a planet of power, but Pluto does not by any means just go handing out power for free. He kind of forces us to go through a death and rebirth process, or some sort of like very, very deep, powerful spiritual transformational process. Pluto rules the psyche. Okay. So with that said, and when we think about that, Pluto, if you just picture Pluto, if he was a human and he's super aggressive, driving backwards. I mean, how many people drive better backwards than they do forwards? Probably not many. So it's more like he's just a little more aggressive with his that energy that comes through. It's more like I hear a tone inside of me when I think about Pluto, and it's just so so be thinking about that. This opposition, often what can happen here, it's like just thinking about what we're receiving from those celestial bodies. So Pluto over here, when there's an opposition, it's like he's trying to overpower the sun and the moon. And really what we want to do is we want to integrate them together. We want to bring them together so that they can complement each other. But when we have an opposition, it's almost like one of those celestial bodies is trying to dominate the other one. And they're both trying to do it, especially in such powerful, aggressive, masculine signs. Sign of Leo and Aquarius are both masculine. But I would say that, in my opinion, the sun is kind of, he can kind of dominate here a little bit more than Pluto, because the sun rules the sign of Leo. He's in his own home. He gets to work comfortably there. Not only that, but he's got the moon right next to him. So I think these guys are going to be a little bit stronger, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially if you've got something near 2 degrees in your natal chart. And I really mean it, in any zodiac sign. And I'll explain to you why a little later in the recording. That those you very well could be experiencing something that's either, it could be deeply aggressively spiritual, or maybe not even spiritual, just something that's really coming up for you, or maybe it's something that's trying to be flushed out. Because Pluto, I remember way back in my early days of when I first went to my first astrology school, keywords for Pluto, one of them was sewage, and I was like, oh, what's that about? And it's because it's about fleshing things out in order to make room for the more powerful new beginning. And a lot of times that's going on in the psyche. Of course, it can happen out in our external environment. But with Pluto, and especially the sun and the moon all involved, I would say it might be more internal, what's going on within yourself. So there's that. Now, let's talk about Mercury here. So Mercury is in retrograde until, I believe it's August 10th, but it'll be a shadow period all the way until August 24th. And so with that said, I mean, I don't personally put a lot of emphasis on Mercury retrogrades. I know a lot of people will be like, no, don't, you can't have a business meeting during Mercury retrograde or have that important conversation during Mercury retrograde. I have one client that she's an author and she doesn't like to write in her books when Mercury's in retrograde. And all those things ring true for sure. But at the same time, I would say that's more significant if you're either a Virgo or a Gemini rising. But also if you've got anything, let's go with between, Mercury's going to go back all the way to 4 degrees Leo. So if you've got anything between 4 and 15 degrees Leo, something prominent, especially if it's either Mercury or Mars or your rising sign or your sun or your moon, then that's a little bit more of a prominent transit for you. And very well could be a time to be reevaluating what's going on in your life before you speak about it or before you write about it. Okay, now but overall, I do like Mercury in Leo. I mean, honestly, I like Mercury in a lot of different signs because even though Mercury is considered debilitated in the sign of Leo, but what I do like about it is a lot of people who are born with their Mercury in Leo, they can speak courageously, like they don't hold back. So sometimes they can have playfulness to their communication skills as well. But a lot of times I love the, again, like the not holding back. It's like the courageous voice just comes out. Sometimes it could be a little overbearing, but overall it's a strong, most people who have Mercury and Leo, like I kind of in essence admire their ability to just speak out with loyalty and that sort of thing. Okay, hope you get the picture. Now, let's go over to, Matt, let's do it. So here is Neptune and here is Saturn. So they are both making a very, very strong trine up to the sun and the moon. That's what those blue lines are. So trines, as most people know, it's like a harmonious ray. It's like the sun and the moon are sending harmonious rays over to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So let's break this down. Saturn is what influences things like discipline and structure and responsibilities. And Saturn is a very cold and rigid energy. Okay, Saturn, we need him. I mean, Saturn, look at it this way. When somebody's got a really strong, happy Saturn in their natal chart, these are people who tend to be really, really good at taking care of their responsibilities and being very disciplined, versus if somebody's got a Saturn that's really struggling in their natal chart, these are people that tend to have a harder time taking care of their responsibilities and that sort of thing. That's what Saturn's all about. And going through the sign of Aries, if we think about the sign of Aries, it's the pioneer. Aries is the warrior. Aries is the self-starter. Aries says, let's go. It's cardinal fire, okay? It comes through with force. Saturn going through Aries, he's debilitated there, but this is almost like kind of militant, really. I mean, it really is. It's, especially while Saturn's in retrograde and Neptune's in retrograde. Woohoo, there's a lot of stuff in retrograde for this new moon. But with that said, Neptune here. So Neptune is what influences things like dreams and illusions and visions and psychic powers and intuition. Okay. Neptune's kind of like what influences things that are of a very spiritual and mystical nature. And so with that said, and he's also the god of the sea, I kind of feel like he's dampening Saturn's rigidness out a little bit. Of course, this is going to depend how it's hitting your own natal chart. But on the same token, it's like, so Neptune is kind of dampening Saturn's rigidness. But at the same time, Saturn is kind of closing in on Neptune's very dreamy, again, like dreaming things up, visions to create. There's actually the combination of these guys definitely can influence things that are of a creative nature, especially sign of Leo can certainly be creative. I mean, if we think about the fact that it's ruled by the sun, I mean, when we think about what the sun does for us every single day of the year, no matter what the season is, the sun creates life. Okay. And the sun being Leo's ruler, it's a very creative energy, but especially with these guys coming through this sign of Aries. And by the way, so they are going to be in the sign of Aries until it's something like October, September. I can't remember exactly, but they're in retrograde. They're going to go back into Pisces one more time this year. And then later, I believe it's the end of February of next year, then Saturn and Neptune will move back into the sign of Aries. So it's almost like they're peeking their head in there to be like, hey, Aries, we're here. We might create some commotion in here. But at the same time, it's almost like, what do you want to create as a self-starter, the pioneer? I would say, especially while they're in retrograde, it's kind of important to have patience with what you want to create. Just considering this new moon, it's almost like just setting the intention and really writing this stuff down and making the plans for it. And really next year, depending on what this project or whatever it is that you're considering to build up or to grow with the new beginnings, I would say that the energy is going to start to pick up a little bit more next year, but definitely a good idea to set the intentions for that. And this is also what I'm talking about. Neptune is at 2 degrees Aries. Okay. Pluto is at 2 degrees Aquarius. This new moon is at 2 degrees Leo. Then also Saturn is at 1 degree. That's awfully close. In fact, Saturn is at 1 degree, 49 minutes Aries. And so that's very, very close to 2 degrees. Now, if I head up here, this right here is Uranus, which Uranus is what influences things like radical changes, rebelliousness, inventions, ideas. What are we going to come up with? Uranus wants to get rid of the old way of doing things and bring in new ways of doing things, especially if that involves some form of technology. And I kid you not, with Uranus in Gemini, and this is another one, so to get very technical here, Uranus is peeking his head into the sign of Gemini for a few months, and then he retrogrades back in the sign of Taurus until April of next year. Then Uranus will be taking it'll be about a 6.5-year journey through the sign of Gemini. But, okay, at 0 degrees, it's also making a very, very strong sextile over to these guys, over to Saturn and Neptune. And then we have Saturn and Neptune making a very strong sextile to Pluto. And then Pluto and Uranus are trining each other. Now, when we think about this, I know I've kind of explained this to you guys before, but in case you're new here or in case somebody wants a reminder, when we think about this connection that's going on between these power players, it's Uranus here is like the grandfather. Okay. But if we're going into mythology, Greek mythology, Uranus will be the grandfather who was the father of Saturn here, Kronos. Okay. Then Saturn would be the father of Pluto and Neptune. Now, these guys they do not get along. In essence, they all kind of became a tyrant to a certain extent. Okay. But Saturn cut off his father's, Uranus's, testicles. Okay. And that's obviously an aggressive move there. But if you can picture, a grandfather and a father, and then the two sons all sitting at some sort of like a dinner table, and they don't get along, and they're all in masculine signs. Gemini is masculine, Aries is masculine, Aquarius is masculine. Okay. And it's even though these are very opportunistic connections, okay, these green lines, these sextiles do create opportunities, and a trine is harmonious, but they're all having this very aggressive conversation. And I say with a whirlwind of confidence that this is going to create incredible changes. Going back up here to Uranus and Gemini. So Gemini is like the sign of social media. It's a sign of communication. The motto is I think. It's very hyper intellectual. It's the forever student. And Uranus, again, creates ideas, like new things, inventions, can have to do with science and technology. Okay, going through this very intellectual sign of Gemini, the sign that rules over communication, what we are about to see come through using things like social media, over these next 6.5, 7 years, I think we're going to see the most outrageous changes that literally we can't even dream them up right now. But and then not only that, but Pluto going through Aquarius. So Pluto again, Pluto's basically the destroyer, okay? But again, he destroys to create a more powerful new beginning or a powerful rebirth. And in the sign of Aquarius, another air sign. We've got Gemini is an air sign, Aquarius is an air sign. They're both very electrical energies. And in fact, the sign of Aquarius can also have a little bit to do with social media, more the technological advancements that come with it. But when we think, I mean, even air travel, transportation through the air, I think we're going to see some massive changes with that. And not immediately, but I'm more prominently, I'm going to even say within the next 3 years, because this conversation that's going on between these two guys, this would be his grandson, this would be grandfather, this would be his grandson, and they're both very strong energies, and so that connection that's going on between them, I think we're going to see some incredible changes here on Earth. And I will say this as well, that yes, United States certainly has a reputation for going into war when Uranus enters into the sign of Gemini. I don't think that if we go into this, quote unquote World War III, I don't think it's going to be quite, what we're used to thinking about as war. We watch movies about wars or that sort of thing. I mean, of course, that stuff very well could go on, but I think it's going to be more like psychological and spiritual, especially since Neptune is here involved in this conversation between these guys. It's like through that social media, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. If you're somebody who uses, Instagram, Telegram, Facebook, I don't know what the other ones, there's a bunch of them. There's a lot of them. I can't think of the name of it. TikTok. Regardless, it's like, be mindful of what we're seeing. I mean, what the stuff that we are seeing created through the AI is, some of it's freaking hilarious, but some of it is also a little spooky. It's a little bit, I mean, well, how are we supposed to know what's real and what's not? I know that you can kind of tell, when something is AI. Apparently it's like, the lips don't exactly touch on it, so-called person when they're talking using AI. But there's going to be even more advancements, and I think it's going to get really, really, really wild. And that could be part of what that's incorporated into aggressiveness and war. Okay. So that is something very much to take into consideration here. And I certainly don't want to scare anybody. I'm not scared. I feel like, as long as we're keeping ourselves safe and keeping ourselves grounded and protected, I think humanity, honestly, since these are opportunistic and harmonious connections going on, the way that I see this, and maybe this is just my Sagittarius rising and my Pisces sun kind of wearing rose-shaded glasses, but I do think that it's not going to happen immediately. But I do think that there's good potential within the next 19 years while Pluto goes through Aquarius. Aquarius is really like the sign of humanitarianism. It's like the sign of the whole tribe. Okay. I do think that humanity very well could get some power back. Okay. And honestly, this is my wishful thinking that, the whole division between, Democrats and Republicans, and of course there's other little things involved, but red, blue, wing, right wing, left wing, whatever all that stuff is. It's like, I think especially with what we're seeing right now, because so many people, had so much faith in Trump. And of course, still some people do, but a lot of people are pissed off that, this whole thing with the Epstein files, and all of a sudden, oh no, that was a hoax. And people are getting pissed off. And I think that potentially, hopefully, this brings more people together rather than this division of different parties. Okay. I think humanity needs to come together. I've said this for so many years that I do not have any faith in any one human that could be elected as president and all of a sudden makes everything better. It has to be humanity who comes together to make this world a better place. Okay. Apologies for the rant. Okay. Now let's talk about let's go up here to Venus and talk about something a little more lovely. So Venus going to the sign of Gemini, 22 degrees Gemini. Gemini, again, the sign of communication. It's a sign of duality. It's the twins. It's the sign of the siblings. It's the sign, again, can have a lot to do with social media. If you've got anything near 22 degrees Gemini, that might be really nice because it's like, depending on what it is, but she could be like bringing some sort of love or beauty or harmony, or maybe it's like a singing voice or poetry or something that's just of a lovely nature into your life, especially using poetry or songwriting, something like that, because Gemini has a lot to do with writing stuff. I actually know quite a few songwriters who were born with their Venus in Gemini. Okay. Now, with that said, it's like we're all receiving that Venusian energy through this sign that is of communication. Again, take into consideration that Mercury is in retrograde. Went into detail on that. So it might not be the most ideal time for something like a very important business meeting. Again, especially if you've got something between 4 and 15 degrees Leo. But if you've got something near 22 degrees Gemini, it might be a nice time to do some creative writing or something of that nature. In fact, now that I think about it, there's actually quite a few placements here that really do influence some good creativity, like new ideas on what you want to create for the world. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's talk about Jupiter in Cancer. I think this is our saving grace. Jupiter is going through the sign of Cancer until it's the end of June of 2026. So Jupiter, the great benefic, who influences, we call him the great benefic, it's because it's like Jupiter is where we receive the most beneficial energy out of all those lights in the sky. Jupiter is what influences things that are of abundance and philosophy and wisdom. And it's very optimistic and faith-based energy that we receive from Jupiter. Well, he's exalted. He works with his greatest strength in the sign of Cancer. Cancer, it's like basically Jupiter can be more charitable. Okay. If you've got anything near 10 degrees Cancer, you might be, again, it depends on what it is. Jupiter can be, anything could be a little bit troublesome. There's always going to be pros and cons to every little thing in astrology. Of course, some things are going to be more beneficial and some things are going to be a little more malefic. But Jupiter, if anything, Jupiter, I would say, can have an influence on people like expanding at the waistline, or Jupiter rules the arteries, can have something to do with like something going on with the arteries, or potentially some sort of a growth in the body or on the body, that sort of thing. Jupiter can do that because he expands things. But just as a good generalization here, Jupiter can bring, like, he could be extra charitable in that sign of Cancer. So again, especially if you've got something near 10 degrees Cancer, you might notice some sort of abundance, or maybe something that's of optimism, or something that makes you have a little more faith in the days surrounding this transit. Okay, now let's go on here to Mars. So this is an interesting one. So Mars is what influences action. Okay, Mars is the planet of war. Okay, Mars definitely can irritate things. Mars can be aggressive. Mars, if you just look at the symbol for Mars, it's because he wants to pierce and penetrate through things. Mars is hot and dry. Mars can influence things like rashes or burns or accidents because he's aggressive. But on the same token, we absolutely need Mars, because Mars is what will make people, go to the gym and start working out, or go running, or whatever it is, something that requires physical action, that requires for our muscles and our adrenal glands to get rolling. Okay, whether that's in a good way or a bad way. But going through the sign of Virgo, it's like the perfectionist of the zodiac. Virgo is the sign of purification. Okay, Virgo is the sign that really wants to pay very close attention to the details and be very analytical. And I always think, years ago when I used to give astrology readings at this cute little herb shop in downtown Santa Cruz, California, it wasn't just herbs. Of course, they had tons of, go ask Alice. Wonderful shop if you're ever in the Santa Cruz area. But they have, they called it the one-stop hippie shop. They have the, tapestries and, cute little hippie clothes and decor for the home, crystals, all kinds of things like that. And these two ladies that worked there both had their Mars in Virgo, and they had this incredible knack to, when they would go put things into action, they wanted to organize. Okay, I'm going to reorganize the crystals over here, and I'm going to reorganize the herbs or whatever it is. They very much paid meticulous attention to detail and how they were organizing things. Okay, that's very, and then they would, analyze it. Does everything look perfect? That sort of thing. It's very Virgo energy. So Mars is activating that within all of us, really, especially if this is hitting something in your chart. And what I mean by that is that if you've got something prominent, say, we'll just keep it simple, near 21 degrees Virgo. But on that same token, what's making this very, very interesting is that this is the South Node, which the South Node is going through the sign of Virgo all the way until July of 2026. Now, the South Node, and by the way, that's when the South Node will move into the sign of Leo. That's going to be a trippy transit. But the South Node is like a drain that drains things away. So when we think about this, it's like the sign of Virgo there's an energy that's trying to activate it with Mars, but then there's also right next to that, this thing that's trying to drain things out. I'm kind of thinking about people, say organizing your house or your drawer or your car or something where it's like, it's going to require this level of, I'm going to put myself into service here. I want to activate, I want to clean, I want to make things, again, the sign of Virgo is very much about cleanliness and purification. I want to clean this up. And with that said, I also need to get rid of some stuff that's just not serving this area that I'm trying to, make aesthetically pleasing. Okay. So that's, especially if you've got something, let's just go down to 17 degrees Virgo up to 25 degrees Virgo. And again, of course, that very much depends on what that thing is in your chart. But if you do have something there, keep that in mind. And this could also be very much going on within your physical body. As I've mentioned before, the sign of Virgo rules the intestines and the liver. Okay, that South Node going through there really does influence, especially if it's hitting something in your chart, if it's hitting your Mars or whatever it is. It might be a really good time between now and July of next year to be doing like gentle detoxes in the intestines and the liver. Especially Mars is there. Mars can pierce and penetrate through things. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's talk about the North Node over here going through the sign of Pisces. That will be there until July of 2026, the end of July of 2026. So we're all receiving this Piscean influence, okay? The North Node is like a pump that works off of magnetism. Whatever sign it's going through, it's pumping that energy in. So we are all, as a collective, receiving more of this Pisces energy. Pisces is the sign of oneness. Pisces is the sign of peace. And, of course, there's other signs that can be associated with peace, but Pisces is the sign that's like, why can't we all just get along? Doesn't mean everybody who's a Pisces is going to be like that. But the sign of Pisces in and of itself, it's the mystic, it's the dreamer. It's the one that has these like visions and like kind of psychic powers, that sort of thing. Again, it doesn't mean everybody who's a Pisces is going to be like that. But the sign of Pisces in and of itself is very dreamy and mystical. Okay. And so it's spiritual. So we're all receiving that. Look to see in your chart if you've got anything near 19 degrees Pisces, because if you do, realize that North Node is bringing more of that Pisces energy onto that specific thing in your natal chart. Okay, now let's go. We can't leave Chiron out here. So Chiron, the wounded healer, Chiron is going to be in the sign of Aries all the way until 2027. I can't remember what month in 2027. Apologies for that. But basically, be thinking about this, especially if you have something prominent near 27 degrees Aries. In fact, I just popped in my head. I do have a client who's, I think she's 26 degrees Aries rising. And she's like, I cannot believe the journey that I'm on right now with this healing stuff and having all these like complete and utter, I can't remember the word she used to describe it, but things that are coming up from her early childhood. That's very Chiron. Okay. It's like the wounds that we experience from early childhood or potentially somehow coming from a previous lifetime. Okay, these wounds that we're meant to experience. And a lot of times, especially if you're, some people have really done the work to do the healing, but a lot of people haven't as well. Okay, and with that said, a lot of people they are not in touch with these wounds. They don't even know that they're there. It's a subconscious thing that kind of makes them do something that's maybe not exactly the way they wish they could be doing it. And it's all because of these wounds that are deep buried within us. Okay. And Chiron, he might be the influencer of those wounds, but on the same token, he wants us to heal from those wounds. Well, he's called the wounded healer. And going through the sign of Aries, it's the warrior, it's the sign of self, it's the first sign of the zodiac. So that's something, and if you're somewhere in the realm of 50 years old, you very well could be experiencing a Chiron return. A lot of times when that happens, people will be like, gosh, this thing that I've been trying to fix within myself for the last 20 years, I've been trying to fix this thing about myself. And suddenly I realized, why am I trying to fix this thing? Well, yeah, the really weird things going to happen with Chiron. So take that into consideration here. Okay, now did I cover everything I wanted to here? I think so, but I'm just going to go back and put a little more emphasis on this. Literally, if you have anything very prominent, say your sun, your moon, your rising, or even going into Mercury or Mars or Venus, really anything near 2 degrees in any zodiac sign, especially if it's actually at 2 degrees, because we've got this new moon, of course, at 2 degrees, but then we've also got Neptune here at 2 degrees Aries, and then we've also got Saturn at 1 degree Aries, and then that's obviously very, very close to 2 degrees, 1 degree, 49 minutes. And then Uranus here at 0 degrees, that's still pretty darn close to 2 degrees. And so these things, let's say you've got, and also Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius. Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you've got something, let's say between 2 degrees Scorpio or Taurus, that would be squaring these things. If you've got anything near 2 degrees Sagittarius, it's going to be trining. There's going to be trines going on. It could be up here in the sign of Cancer. And that could even be making a square over here to the stuff in Aries. Just look out for that 2 degrees mark in your natal chart. Even if it's a midpoint, this could be an extra powerful new moon for you. Okay, so I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Let's talk about body parts. Okay, so sign of Leo, I think I mentioned this already. It rules the heart, okay? Also rules basically the upper part of the back, okay? Once we get into the lower back, that's a little bit getting more into the Libra area. But the upper part of the spine, you'll notice a lot of people who have like strong, prominent Leo placements, they'll have like a big, strong back, or just kind of like a big open chest sort of area here. Certainly not all of them, because there's things that can counteract it. But it's like this area of the body. And by the way, the sign of Leo also does have an influence on the gallbladder. If you have gallbladder issues, there's a lot of different signs and things that can have an influence on the gallbladder in medical astrology. But the sign of Leo is one of them. So if you've got, gallbladder issues, you might want to be careful about what you're eating, what you're consuming, what you're putting in your body during this kind of transit. And all this Leo energy going on. But I really want to focus on the heart. So with that said, this right here is hawthorn. And hawthorn, I like to do the berries and you can probably hear it. I like to do the berries and the leaves from hawthorn. Hawthorn actually can relax the arteries in the heart. And this right here is a motherwort, which motherwort more kind of relaxes the cardiac system. And I really do have a lot of faith in these. I pretty much always have motherwort and hawthorn in the house because I have stuff in my natal chart that it really says I need to protect my heart. I'll just say this, that I've got my Saturn in Leo and it makes a quincunx with my sun, and that's not very good for heart. But overall, it was last week, I was kind of attacked by a swarm of yellow jackets. I was outside and I was pulling weeds and I was watering, and apparently I either stepped on like a wasp nest or irritated them by pulling out the weeds or something like that. And all of a sudden I'm basically just eaten alive. I was like, oh my God, it hurt so bad. But one of the worst, I don't know if it was a bite or a sting. I couldn't find the stinger, but one of them was right on my heart. And I kid you not, it started to scare me. I mean, I'm not somebody who's going to go running off to the hospital. I do everything I can to avoid doctors. I try to do everything I can to protect myself. But it was on my feet. If I'm being honest, it was like on my butt cheeks as well. That was really, really painful as well. But the one on my heart started to scare me because it was like everything started to tense up in that area. I could feel it in my body, all around my heart. Everything started getting really, really tense, like it was trying to protect my heart from the poisons. But I mean, I did a ton of, I did medicinal mushrooms, I did calendula, I did all activated charcoal, I did bentonite clay, I did all this stuff to help make sure my body was going to be okay from these yellow jackets. But something that I noticed is I did I did the mother or and hawthorn to kind of relax the heart area. And I really, really noticed a very significant difference. It did seem to be like within 20 minutes, I was like, okay, because that was the only thing that was scaring me about the situation. So I do have a lot of faith in those. And again, especially if you've got like something weird going on in the sign of Leo in your natal chart, it's a good idea to take care of our heart. Okay, now enough of that. Those I'm definitely be indulging those in the days surrounding this transit. Now, for gemstones, the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Leo is ruby. So right here is a ruby, as if the camera is going to pick that up. Rubies are generally red, and I wear a ruby pretty much every day because of my weird Saturn in Leo stuff on my natal chart. The quincunx is my sun. Okay, ruby. It's actually the sun's stone in the Jyotish Upaye medical astrology system, like ancient system. The sun or the rubies are the sun's stone, which is lovely because it's Leo's dedicated zodiacal birthstone. Now, when we think about this sign of Leo, which is warm and ruling that heart chakra, the things that open us up, and again, think about what the sun provides for us every day. That's very similar to what a ruby can do. And I wear it in gold because it's Leo's metal is gold. Okay. The sun's metal is gold. And if I'm being totally honest, this was something my grandmother apparently liked a lot of jewelry. And this came from my grandmother. I did not actually go out and buy this up for myself, but I feel like that was karma. I was supposed to have it. But a ruby can be, if you've got like some, say you're born, what is it, like 1977, 1998, you might have your Saturn in Leo, ruby set in gold could be really good for that. There's a lot of different placements that would encourage or really people could really benefit from a ruby set in gold, especially a Leo rising. Now, on that note, rubies are not exactly totally the most affordable thing, at least, these kinds of rubies, but this right here is an opaque ruby, which is much, much, much more affordable and still very metaphysically powerful. And when we think about, somebody who has their sun in Leo, unless it's super like being conjunct Saturn or something like that, then a ruby might not be the most ideal because the Leo people, if you're like a true Leo, you've already got that boom, like that Leo courageous, playful energy. But if you've got something that's troublesome going on in the sign of Leo, or again, a Leo rising can actually make you shine even more. Okay. Rubies are a wonderful stone for that. Now, next up, I'm going to mention this one. This right here is tiger's eye, which I'm always disappointed with the camera, how it doesn't really show how beautiful. Tiger's eye, if you've never seen it in person, it's a gorgeous stone. In fact, the next one I'll show you is a couple, they're my favorite stones to look at, especially in the sun, because they're so beautiful. But tiger's eye and tiger's iron in kind of different ways are really good for willpower. Okay, if there's something that I got to go, it's going to require some willpower. As a Pisces, often I need to tap into willpower. I need that encouragement from something like tiger's eye. And so that's kind of what I would, if that's something you want to manifest within yourself, more willpower, tiger's eye could be a really good stone for that. And again, also tiger's iron. I'd say tiger's iron is a little bit more protective than tiger's eye. They both could be kind of protective, but regardless, they both will influence strength. The next one I'm going to bring up, this right here, is Labradorite, which Labradorite does resonate beautifully with the sign of Leo. But part of the reason I brought it up, this is not what I'm talking about. It's like, the camera is kind of showing how beautiful it is, but it's just, you go look at these things in the sun, it's just phenomenal. Labradorite can be really good for communication. Okay, that's part of the reason I generally have some Labradorite around my desk here when I'm giving readings, because it encourages like clear and concise communication skills. And since Mercury is in retrograde in the sign of Leo, that's very specifically why I wanted to bring the Labradorite out. And then lastly here, this right here is amber, which amber is beautiful for the heart. And I can't remember, I should have looked this up before I started this. I can't remember what it was. I think I want to say it was like an Egyptian, the, what the Egyptians would place. I just can't remember for sure if it was the Egyptians, so don't quote me on that. I just know that there was some sort of a culture or civilization that's very specifically used amber on the heart. It does resonate beautifully with the sign of Leo. I mean, look at it. It's like, the kind of the color of the sun, but at the same time, on the heart for things, whether it be a physical ailment with the heart or just heartache, a breakup or the loss of somebody. It's said to like open things up in that heart area. So those are the stones that I am going to be working with for this new moon. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to schedule your own natal chart analysis, and I kid you not, it's a really good time, especially like preparing for what's coming up. I think it's a really, really good time to get an astrology reading. If you'd like to schedule a reading with me, you can schedule through my website, which is erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. You can even leave like little notes when you schedule what you want to focus on. But I'm having a great time giving readings right now because there's so much to talk about. Okay, so I do hope to hear from some of you, and until next time, namaste to all of you.